So I just want to do a video. This SRAM 2-speed shifter. This one is the standard one, and it's still got its mechanism in there. What we're going to do is we're going to modify it, open it up, modify it, and we're going to get rid of that mechanism, put it all back together. And then what that means is basically you can run this as a dropper post remote, which is really nice because if you've got the other, so you had like a 1x10 speed setup and you've got a dropper post, then you could basically have two of the same shifters on the handlebars and it kind of looks neat, it looks original. But obviously this one is going to be for a dropper post. I just wanted to say if you've got like a different era of SRAM shifter, then it's potentially going to be a lot different inside. And also if you've got like Shimano or Microshift and different companies, then yeah, it's not really going to apply to you. It's just for this era of SRAM stuff. So this was the 2x10 speed era. And I don't know if the X3, X4, X5, X9, XO or XX1, all this kind of stuff. I don't know if they had XX1 at that time, not sure. But yeah, it's basically just for this shifter. So yeah, first things first, you're going to grab a little Allen key. And then there is these 4 little Allen bolts. And then we're just going to take these off and then I'll show you what it looks like after. So there you go, we've taken all the Allen key bolts out. It was a 2.5mm Allen key, which is no use me telling you after, but you get the idea. And that allows us to separate the casings. Obviously on these ones, if you want to put a cable in, it's got a little rubber hole there, so the actual casings don't need to come apart, but there you go. There's a little spring in there, so you just want to be a bit careful. And that's what it's going to look like. You're going to take this wound up spring off. It just goes in this little hole over here. Just undo that and then pull that off. It does sit in a little recess there. There is a little kind of clip just there, and it might get stuck in there, so you might have to pull that a little bit harder. And from here you can basically see the mechanism. Let's have a look in there. And obviously you've got no spring on it, so it's not going to return, so I'll do that manually. But this is the clicking mechanism, and the problem, or the thing that we're going to modify, is this little tooth here. So there's a little ratchet system right there, and all you got to do really is just file that away, so that when you kind of do press the button, it's just going to bypass, it's just going to slide past that, and just keep doing that. But this still moves. You just want this to move as natural, like as it would normally. Obviously that's going to have your cable in it, and that's going to be it's going to be adjusting your dropper post via that. This top bolt is a 3mm, and then there's one at the bottom as well, which is also 3mm. So you want to get 2 of them. Just undo that. This little red bit comes off, and then probably better if I've done it now. I could show you the mechanism. It's a bit of a reflection. There we go, it's a bit better. So ultimately, yeah, it's just this area here with these teeth. That's what causes it to ratchet as you turn that. You can just see down there, kind of clicks into that area. So the option is you can either, let me take this out. And then there's a plate as well. So you obviously have an option here if you wanted to file down this tooth here. And then there's one on the other side as well. And that would stop the mechanism from working. Or you could take this plate and you can get rid of this tooth there. So that's what we're going to do, just because it seems a bit easier. There's only one of them, so we're just going to get a file and smooth this off, probably get rid of that whole thing so it looks something like that, and then we'll get back to you when it's done and put it all back together. Yeah, just be aware this is it's a good sturdy piece of steel, and then we've got like a fine grade metal file on there, and we're just going to basically file that away. I won't do it for the whole video because it's really quite loud. But yeah, it gives you an idea. It's very, very simple. Potentially you could get a little hacksaw if you wanted and just cut a straight line, but I'm going to go with a file. So this is what we are left with after. It's all this edge, so we've got rid of that little notch there. And I think this is the best option. The other thing with this bit, obviously it has two notches. You want to keep this notch because that's when the lever comes back and it hits into there and it stops the lever kind of going around too far. So you'd only want to cut that notch out, but yeah, I think basically modifying this plate was the better option really. So yeah, now we're going to put it all back together. So yeah, this is basically the internals of this lever here. So you've got these 4 items here. You've got like a fork, which is still needed. I'm not actually sure if this is needed for the dropper post, but we're going to put this spring back on. That's your main spring that returns your lever to the original position. And then this is like a top cap. So we're just going to get this. Just zoom in on that if we can. There we go. And we're going to rebuild it. Goes this way round. So that slots in, there's kind of like a little hole. So that will slot into there like so. And then you can grab your spring. Move these out of the way so it doesn't focus on that. And you can see basically on this circular bit there, the end of the spring's touching. That's where the round bit of that spring sits. So it just goes on like so. And then there's a little kind of bit here, like a little dip. Just in there. Black on black's not really going to show up too well. I don't think I've got anything else. But yeah, there's basically a little dip. And that's where the end of this spring has to sit into. So I'm just going to try and push that over. There we go. If we can zoom in a bit more, or just go up to it. You can kind of see that's how it goes back together. And then all you've got to do is put your this top cap on. It only goes on one way, so you can't really mess it up. Let's see if we can get this on first time. Yeah. And you can see there's a little hole there, and it has to sit on top of that bit of the fork. And you might need to kind of jiggle that fork around a little bit for that to line up properly. Just looking at this, have I got it the right way? Does it want to sit that way? No. So it definitely goes that way. And there you go. So that's your lever mechanism back in place. And if you did have like a proper shifter, not a dropper kind of conversion, that helps you shift down the gears again. So when you press the little lever on the side, it pushes that and it allows it to basically bypass the mechanism. Could have potentially maybe have jammed that on and maybe that would have worked for the dropper post, but I'm not too sure. And then this spring, not 100% sure which way around this goes until I actually put it on the thing. But if you look on the side here, there's a few little gaps. And you can just basically prop that spring into there. It goes in this biggest gap, that's what I believe anyway. I should have checked it when I took it out. So yeah, that's going to sit into there. So you can see on that spring, there's just a little kind of bit that sticks out and that's just going to go inside there. And then that's your spring mechanism done. And then they're going to get the bottom part of your housing. And you can see somebody's already done this quite a few times with a spring. There's quite a few scratches on here. Nice bit of metal, good bit of quality from SRAM there. And then you're going to basically thread that through. That's going to sit in there like so. And then there is a little hole inside there which the end of that spring basically slots into, so it kind of sits like that but just inside. It's kind of hard to see, but if you're doing it you'll be able to see it anyway. So that just sits in there and then you can kind of turn the mechanism round. Make sure that's in there. And the other thing you want to make sure is you can see that this bit of the metal is coming over. It needs to sit basically behind. You don't want that in front because that will interfere. So what I mean is this bit of metal right here, there, that wants to kind of sit down there and get out of the way. Yeah, that's your main mechanism. The other thing is when you put the next bit on, you can kind of push underneath and put that into there if you want. You don't have to do it beforehand. So now we're going to get this part. Let's put this over here. That'll probably all come undone. We'll have to redo it, but it's generally in the right place. For this bit, there is a little spring on the side. And if we can zoom in, it basically just sits like that. If we can get it focused, there we go. So there is actually a kind of a little recess there for the spring to sit onto. And it just means when you push that lever, it's pushing back against it. So there's a nice, not that we're going to need that, but you might need it on your one. And then the bottom bit just basically sits into the housing, basically just goes in there, doesn't have any slot, it just goes against that bit of metal right there. So let's put this back together. And you need to have the lever. You need to have the lever in that kind of position, otherwise it won't line up. We might just push that back down a bit too far, I think. It basically should be the second, on the second row of springs. So you've got one, and then the second one right there. That's where this should be in line with. If it goes a bit deeper than that, it could cause a bit of an issue. There we go, that's in place. We're just going to push that to there. I'm going to pop this on top, make sure your little side spring is in the right place. Just basically got to line, slot everything into the right place, line it up, and that's your kind of bottom part of it done. There is a little bit here that lines up right in that bit there. Also the spring obviously goes on top of there, sits over there, and just check your side spring because sometimes that can fall out and stick out. And then what we're going to do is put our modified plate on there. And there is a bit on top that says like 2S, just there, and that goes on the top. So you can see that the bottom bit's a bit dull looking. Obviously the top bit hasn't had as much wear. And that just lines up, so that little tooth on there goes into this kind of jagged bit here, lines up with that. That's your mechanism done. Then what we're going to do is, on the back of here there's three little kind of circular, well they're not circular but they're rectangles with like a curve in them. And that basically just lines up with this plate. So you've got like 1, 2 and 3. Just take that plate and the biggest one's there, so that will go on there. So just try and line it up. You've got to try and keep this all compressed at the same time. So that's that, and you're going to get your bolt, and you've got your top bolt at the same time. We're just going to tighten them up. Sometimes it's not in great alignment, so you might have to kind of wiggle it about a little bit. So we're just going to tighten that until it starts turning the bolt on the other side, and we're just going to nip that up. Yeah, keep it all kind of compressed. Try and keep this pushed against it. See how tight that is. Do we want to go a bit more? They are a little bit weird, these shifters, because once that's all bolted together you can still see that this could move, but once you put the top bit on and put those Allen keys that you took off first, it should all be okay. And then this is the moment of truth. So we're going to shift into first gear. There you go. That's your dropper post mechanism. Obviously it's not going to return because we don't have the spring on, so I'll put that on now. There's a little kind of square hole there, and inside that square hole you can just see a bit of the spring that sits in the square hole. And then you're going to twist that around. There's also a little kind of clip area here, so right here there's a little kind of lug, and you can push part of the spring inside there to hold it. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take this part of the spring, it goes all the way into this corner, and there's a very, very small hole on the end that slots into. That's basically that. It's a little bit kind of ready to drop off any moment. Might have to shift into first gear, make sure it's down into the right position. But yeah, that's basically that. And if you let go of that, it's all going to fall apart. So you want to grab your top cap, and just inside there is like a little V shape. Just right there. And you want to basically put that on the spring straight away. And then we'll bolt it all together because my battery's going to run out, and then we'll see what happens. So this is that's the setup that I've got. Hopefully you can see that from the camera. This is basically a normal gear cable, but the gear, the little nodule or the little like lug, has to go in the gear lever. So on this end of the cable you just got a straight piece of cable. So you can buy this little barrel, and it's just got a screw in it like a grub screw, and you thread the cable through it, and then you tighten that little flathead screw, and that will hold your wire in place. And you just got to kind of measure it all up. It's a little bit tricky. So yeah, I'm just going to say that in the UK right now we don't really have a lot of daylight. We're kind of in autumn going on to winter time, so it's a little bit dark, so we're using an artificial light. But yeah, there's your SRAM, the modified SRAM 2-speed shifter, and that cable runs basically into the frame here, and it runs down there and then goes up into our internal dropper. I kind of feel like this setup with this shifter would actually be a lot easier if you had a dropper that wasn't internal, because trying to alter the cable, you have to do it at this end, so you have to run the cable through and try and kind of measure things up and trim everything at the dropper end, which is a little bit more difficult. But yeah, if you had a dropper that had the wires on the outside, it'd be quite easy to do. And when you pull the lever, there's your dropper post. So yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, this is all working now. I don't know if it's a warning, but I'm just saying this method is a little bit more difficult to set up. It's harder to get slack out of the cable because you have to do most of your adjustments come from the dropper post end. There's not a lot of trimming you can do at the lever end. There is this, which is your barrel adjuster, which you can turn and you can remove some of the slack, but it's not really going to do too much. And with this kind of system that we have now, that's the amount of slack that we have, and then after there, that's when the dropper cable is pulling on the mechanism. So yeah, all in all, it's just a cheap way really if you don't have a dropper remote.